Mark Higley, and I represent Lowell, Jay, Westfield, Troy, and Eden.
Chris Pearson, Senator from Chittenden County.
On the natural resources. Are there any? Yeah, hopefully Representative Dean and his committee will be coming along. But anyways, we have Senator Ann Cummings with us. Welcome. Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. I don't know if there are any other reps or Senator John Rogers from Oregon, Texas County. Any other reps or senators here? Oh, Senator McDonald's here from Orange County. Yes, Representative Bartholomew from, well, I don't know where he's from, but he's here anyways. But anyways, let's get started with our program. I'd like to welcome and introduce Dr. Heather Darby, who's going to be running, I'd say, the program this morning.
Great.
And calling witnesses up. And I want to assure you witnesses that we're a friendly bunch and not to feel nervous or excited. We put our pants on one leg at a time just like you do, and want you to feel comfortable here testifying and take your time. There's no big hurry. Again, welcome to room 11 in the Statehouse. Heather.
Thank you. And really appreciate everybody coming together today. That was really great. And I understand that it was short notice. And I wanted to thank Allison Eastman for helping us put this together. It meant a lot to the farmers and also to myself to be able to come down and share some information with you. So I'm really excited about it. I testified here, I want to say it was about 6 weeks ago. And I always come in and I try to talk about all the work that farmers are doing, all the exciting research that we're doing at the university. And it's always great to share that information. But at the end of our conversation, one of the senators said to me, "But we have to do something." And he was referring to water quality. And I thought he was kidding, actually, a little bit. And I know I'm not, I realized he wasn't. But what I really thought to myself afterwards was, but we are. And it became really clear to me that myself, as someone that works daily with farmers, and farmers also, were not letting you know what they were doing. And so somebody shouldn't be saying, we have to do something, because we're doing a lot. And so really today, I wanted to share with you the information about what we are doing as it relates to Lake Carmi. Now, one of the reasons, obviously, maybe I don't even need to say why I would be here to talk about Lake Carmi today. It's obviously been a huge discussion point here in Montpelier this year. And after I testified, I started to see information unfold about, sort of what I felt were assumptions being made about the watershed. Bills that were being developed and put out to committees to review, heavily focused on what more agriculture should be doing or needed to do. And I kept reading those thinking, do we really need to do that? Do we know what we need to do? And it became clear to me that I didn't even have the answer to that. And I'm the person that maybe should. And so I looked at my colleague, Jeff Sanders, who is here somewhere. He's hiding in the back. And I said, Jeff, we need to go to Lake Carmi, and we need to bring the farmers together, and we need to understand what's going on there. We need to understand what they've done. We need to understand what more needs to be done, and we need to bring them together. 3 days later, every farmer from Lake Carmi was sitting with us at the Abbey, which is a fun place to hang out anyway if you haven't been there. And we met. Everybody was more than willing to work with us, more than willing to share information with us. It took Jeff 12 hours in total to collect the information. Not a year, not a month, 12 hours. And then Jeff and I looked at the data, we got back together with the farmers, and I said, you know, we need more. And this is where it got a little sensitive, because what I wanted was their nutrient management plans. I wanted to see their soil tests. I wanted to know how much manure was being applied in the watershed, how much manure was coming from outside of the watershed. What I've been led to believe, what I actually believed, was there was a lot of manure coming into that watershed, load after load. I mean, you know, ask anybody who doesn't farm there, and you'll hear the assumptions. My colleagues, my other extension colleagues, farmers from outside of the watershed, it's a mess up there. Because that's what we've been told, but we don't really know yet. So I asked for even more deeper information, and they were willing to give it to me. They were willing to let us walk their farms, to collect all the information, the rec, everything. And so literally in, how many weeks has it been? 2, 3 weeks? As the weeks went by, which has only been 3, a very different story began to unfold for me. And I actually couldn't believe it myself, no offense. I didn't think everybody was up there doing crazy things, but what I was seeing was this very different picture, and that's also when it became very clear to me that I needed to come and share that with you. And that's why I'm here today, to present the information that we have collected, verified, and really it's sharing what is happening currently, okay, in Lake Carmi watershed. Not 10 years ago, not 8 years ago, not even 2 years ago, currently, okay? So here's a current view of the agricultural land in the Lake Carmi watershed as given to us by the people that farm in the Lake Carmi watershed. There is not a single assumption made here, okay? This is the actual data. The green represents hay acres and permanent pasture acres. The yellow represents acres in corn. The total agricultural acres in that watershed is 1,428. Okay? The total acres, including the water, is 7,538. So we're talking about the management of 1,428 acres. There are 13 land operators managing that 1,400 acres, okay? And there's 480 heifers located in the watershed. There are no milking cows. There are approximately 50 beef cows that might visit a pasture once or twice throughout the season, but the only actual livestock in that watershed are 480 heifers. All right? That's the first set of data. Did you know this before? I'm just curious. I'm not judging you. I'm just curious, because I didn't.
We thought there were thousands of cows.
Okay, so wait, we're gonna get to manure is different than cows in a watershed. Okay, so we're
Do
gonna.
you really want us to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm
I
just
think
curious.
We do, because, you know,
Okay.
our committee went up.
Yeah.
We took a look.
Okay.
I think we understand.
All right.
I mean, you thought there were thousands of cows there?
Well, from reading the press,
Oh, you should go visit.
I did.
Okay, so, but I think being able to document clearly what's happening, and the lay of the land is really important. Okay, so nutrient management. So 88% of all the land, okay, so that's like 1,200 acres, is under a nutrient management plan. Now, I put a question mark under the other 12%. About 50 acres of that is state-owned land, and I do not know if they have a nutrient management plan. And the other remaining acreage are a few pastures and a number of hay fields. Okay, it makes up about 169 acres that are not managed under an active nutrient management plan. Okay, but the majority of the acreage of that 1428 acreage is under a current nutrient management plan. Okay? So if we look at the soil test for those acres, you can see that the majority of the farms have soil tests, or the majority of the fields, not the farms, have soil tests that are in optimum, medium, or low for soil test phosphorus. Okay? A much smaller fraction would be considered high. You can see the range for high is 7.1 to 20 parts per million, and even a smaller fraction that would be considered excessive, greater than 20. Okay, 20 parts per million is, when we talk about greater than 20 parts per million, we say that those soils have excessive soil test phosphorus. Okay, so the majority of the farms obviously have been implementing the nutrient management plan, because if they haven't been, those levels would not likely reflect what we're seeing today. All right? So as an agronomist, what we try to do is encourage farmers to have soil test levels in the optimum range. We do not encourage farmers to have nutrient levels in the low range or even the medium range. We want soil nutrients to be optimum. Okay? And what that means is when you've reached optimum, you have enough nutrients to grow your crops. Okay? And then you add a little bit more to maintain the soil levels. You're not adding hundreds of pounds of nutrient at this point. You're adding maybe 20 pounds, maybe 40 pounds. Okay? So from an economic and agronomic perspective, this is where we encourage farmers to have their soil tests. Okay? If they're in low, we're losing economic and agronomic yields and phosphorus removal, to be honest. Okay? So you can see once we get to, so just to describe this graph better for you, again, this is an agronomic graph. When soil test levels are low, that also means the relative crop yield is low. Okay? So the return on investment for adding a nutrient like phosphorus is high. If you add soil phosphorus, in the form of manure or fertilizer, you will see a crop response. Okay? When you get to optimum levels in the soil, adding more phosphorus, you don't see a big increase in yields. Okay? And when you hit high, there's no agronomic benefit to doing this. Okay? Now, once we're above high into excessive, okay, so once we get into 20 parts per million, there's no agronomic benefit to adding more phosphorus, but at this point, too, the amount of phosphorus in the soil becomes more of an environmental risk for loss. Okay? So our goal is to manage fields below 20 parts per million, okay, but in the optimum range. That's where we want our soil tests to be. Now,
Heather, can you say just something briefly about optimum phosphorus, from a relationship between optimum phosphorus for plant growth versus for environmental impacts, water quality?
yeah, so the amount of phosphorus in the water, obviously, the need for phosphorus in the water is much less than for crops, significant fold less, okay? Because we're not trying to grow crops in the water, so we actually want phosphorus to be limiting in water. And when you give phosphorus to water, then it's not limiting anymore, and that's where we see plant growth, right? So the algae, stuff like that. Okay? All right. So we do look at soil test phosphorus to predict potential runoff phosphorus. Okay? So this is a tool that we look at. And so you can see that if the water, if the available soil test P begins to move up, right? So we've set this cutoff as at 20. But if we're in 30, 40, 50, 60 parts per million, you can see the amount of water-soluble phosphorus, so what might move into water, then into surface water, just starts to go up. If you have low soil test phosphorus, that risk is very low. Okay? So most of our farmers' fields are here and below. Okay? We don't have very many fields that we would perceive the soil test phosphorus being extremely risky. Okay? Now that's not to say that you can't lose phosphorus, okay, from a low soil test field. It's just to say the risk is far, far less than when those soil tests start to get above 20. So the majority of the soil tests in the Lake Carmi watershed for agriculture are low, medium, and optimum. Okay, that's really good news. We're not in a situation where we have to stop, have farmers stop fertilizing their fields. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit more because I really want you to understand this concept. And please do not take this the wrong way because I do the same thing with farmers too, the baby blocks. But just to highlight the concept that I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so let's go with 8. Okay, so this is manure, the baby blocks. Okay, and we're adding 8 units of manure to the soil. Manure test or manure phosphorus. Okay, so here's 8 units of phosphorus from the manure. The crop, don't look at those. The crop that I'm talking about needs 4 units of phosphorus. Okay, so the crop has taken it up. There's still 4 left in the soil. The farmer comes in and harvests the 4 units of phosphorus. Okay? They take it away. What's left? Units of phosphorus. What happens if you do that? You'll hear from people for 8 generations of farmers. What happens if you do this 8 generations? Right? What happens? Building up. We call that loading of soils. Okay? There's more than what the crop is utilizing. And when you keep adding more than what the crop is utilizing, what happens to your soil test phosphorus? It keeps going up. Okay? Because you're not removing enough phosphorus from the crops. So the soil test levels that I see in Lake Carmi indicate that this has not been done. I can't tell you how many farmers I've worked with or how many nutrient management plans I've reviewed, but over 300. And this is not always the case. Actually, I'll be honest with you, it's rarely the case that we don't see buildup. We're talking about almost 1,400 acres and a handful, not even, that are showing buildup, that have been loaded. That's nothing. That's less than 1 field per farm, and I guarantee you, and actually tell you, most of those fields are where? Behind the barn. Okay? And likely the farmer that's managing it today didn't do this. They're not doing this. All right? So what I want to show you what is happening today, okay, not 10 years ago. So what's happening today, okay, this is the loading rate, the actual loading rate of phosphorus going on to the fields in Lake Carmi. 34.3 pounds, so actually even less than 4 blocks. That's not much phosphorus. If a field has a low soil test phosphorus, the recommendation would be between 120 and 80 pounds. In optimum, it's generally 30 to 40. Okay? So on the fields, there's less nutrients being added than what the soil test recommendation is even calling for. So they're adding 3 units of phosphorus to the soil. Okay? The plant needs 6 units. Okay, that's what was there before. What's happening to their soils? They're drawing down phosphorus. So that's what this slide shows. The phosphorus supplied by manure and fertilizer, so we counted for both phosphorus fertilizer being brought into the watershed, and it's all corn starter. Okay, there's no phosphorus being liberally applied anywhere else, and corn starter rates are roughly 9 pounds of phosphorus per acre, which is also very low. So you can see the amount of manure and fertilizer phosphorus is 34.3 pounds. Okay, the phosphorus crop need 65.6 pounds. So basically, there's much more phosphorus being removed than what those crops need. And so right now, the current management and trend is that the soil test levels are going down, being managed to go down, which I'm not really for in all cases, because those crops need phosphorus. And if you don't give them the nutrients they need, anyway, we don't have very productive agriculture either. Yes, sir?
Can you tell us a little bit about the crops that need phosphorus? And then
Yep.
on
Yeah.
nutrient management plans, we've heard from your colleagues at UVM
Mhm.
that they would like to be able to access
Yeah.
from the guns
Yeah.
nutrient management
Yeah.
plans, parts of them.
Yeah.
From Dr. I think it was Borotin.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
As well as
Yeah.
others that
Yep.
would like, because they feel as though sometimes when they're working with communities on clean water
Yeah.
or whatever it is, they would like to have access to these
Yeah.
kinds of nutrient. Can you tell us a little bit about how we might get in between,
Yeah.
between giving the right access?
Mhm.
Because I
Yeah.
think what a lot of these folks at UVM and others, folks who are looking at these issues would like certain things, but they can't get them.
Yeah.
So can
Now-
you help us understand? I know that the
Yeah.
House is proposing
Yeah.
perhaps some
Yep.
confidentiality stuff
Yeah,
around
yeah.
it, and I think we'd like to just
Mhm.
be able to give some access
Yeah.
to help.
Now, we have access because of something called social capital,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So we built relationships with people, and they trust us.
Yeah.
And we communicate clearly with people about how their data will be used.
Sure.
Okay? That's really important. There was no way that I was going to sit at a table with the farmers in Lake Carmi and say, give me your data, I'm going to go give it to this person, and then I'm going to bring it to Montpelier, I'm going to show all these people. You know, it's like, put your data together, understand what you're doing, and then decide if you want to share that information. And I am a UVM researcher. I have access to that type of information because of the social capital that I have built with the farming community that has been, it's pretty degraded by most any other organization that I work with, meaning that they used to have that social capital and they don't anymore. People are afraid of how the information is going to be presented. They're not clear about how it's going to be used. And I think that, it's only fair you don't just give it up without knowing, I mean, that's not fair for any of us, Yeah, sure, look at my records. So we can talk. Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about. But I think, and I actually was on that Michael's committee, and he's asked me for information that I have not been willing to share with him at this point because of the current climate that we're dealing with. And I'm not going to ruin my social capital over another nasty article that was, sort of misinterpreted the information in the paper, because that's not how we make progress. So that, that's a concern of someone that has built up social capital with the folks that are sitting in this room that I'm just not willing, because I want to make change. And I know everybody else does too, but sometimes I think we forget that there's a human element to that, a big one. Anyway, I want to keep going through my data because I could get really worked up about that. And I don't want to. And I want to finish sharing. So, the point of the arrows is that there's not much phosphorus actually. So that number accounts. I didn't just make the number up. I actually worked with the farmers to total up all the manure that was being produced and imported into the watershed. And that's the rate. That's the loading rate, okay? And now we have all the details to that too. We can, discuss that further at some other point. But, this is what's happening, okay? Now, the bigger arrow reflects that there's more nutrients being removed from the soil than what's being added. That's leading to a drawdown of nutrients. All right, so the point of the story here is what I think I thought, had misconception as well, was that there was loading of nutrients into the watershed. That's not true, okay? There is manure being brought into the watershed. There are animals in the watershed that produce manure, and that manure is being applied to the fields. Based on all the information we have, it's at lower than agronomic rates. It's lower than most people's prescribed nutrient management plans. And that is the current situation at this point. Okay? So it's great. We're not building up phosphorus on our ag soils. So the next question is, that's good news, but is it leaving? Okay, so the next piece that we get worried about is transport. You apply manure to a field, you get a rainstorm, is it going to move? Okay, you have phosphorus in the soil, we get a rainstorm, some kind of event, is it going to move? So we need to manage for transport, okay? So what this slide is just showing you is that we manage transport 3 different ways, okay? Phosphorus is lost from fields through erosion. It's phosphorus stuck to soil. Sediment-bound phosphorus loss. So we have to manage erosion. We have to manage that transport. Especially as soil test levels get higher, this becomes even a greater concern. Okay? The other thing we have to manage for is what we call dissolved phosphorus, which is phosphorus dissolved in water. Okay? And that is likely, either gets detached from the soil and becomes dissolved in water, or it's the manure that's applied and wasn't incorporated. It can come from many different facets on an agricultural field. Okay? So what we're trying to do is minimize transport. How do we keep it in the field for those crops to utilize it? They're already not getting enough. Okay? We don't want to lose any of it. So we use the Vermont Phosphorus Index, and that's way more information than you need, but we look at phosphorus losses from erosion, in water, and from tile. Okay? So 3 different places. That's the phosphorus index. There is a lot of information that goes in to documenting and figuring out if a field is at high risk for phosphorus loss. Those are all the factors. Location, elevation, the soil test level, how much aluminum is in there, the slope of the field, the crop being grown, if the manure was incorporated, when it was applied, at what rate, the soil type. It's on and on and on. Because we take it seriously. And we want to use the best information to determine if there is a low risk, a high risk, a medium risk, what kind of risk do we have? Okay. So the phosphorus index, the risk of phosphorus loss for the fields being farmed in Lake Carmi is is as follows. Okay? Low risk, about a third of the fields. Okay? Medium risk, half of the fields, 53%. There are some fields that are at high risk. That's 13%. And just to note, they are all hay fields. Okay? They are not corn fields. There's not much corn there to begin with. And there are no fields that are very high risk for phosphorus loss. Okay? So,
None at very high.
right, there are none in very high. There are some that are high. They're being managed. Okay? Generally, if they're high risk, those are likely also the fields that had the high soil test phosphorus, which means they have to lower their manure application rates, the timing at which the manure is being applied to the fields. So those fields have to be managed. Okay? All right. The other way we look at transport is how much erosion is coming off the fields. Okay? And we use this, again, by collecting all the data about the field and evaluating if it's at high risk for loss. Okay? In the state of Vermont, every farm field has to meet T. I'm sure you've all heard this over and over again. I don't know if you know what it means or not, but, you know, that's the law. What is T? It's a tolerable soil loss. Okay? Every soil type is different. This is the soil type in Franklin County, Munson Silt Loam. The allowable soil loss is 2 tons of soil per acre per year for this particular soil type. And for this Rainham Silt Loam, you can see that the tolerable soil loss is 5. Okay, so what a farm field is allowed to use is based on management, weather, a lot of the same factors as phosphorus risk. Okay, so a kind of better agriculturally suited soil, you generally have a higher T value. Okay, I think there's been a lot of discussion about what good is any of this, but I can tell you this. That the tolerable soil loss for most fields in the Lake Carmi watershed is 2 to 3 tons. That's the allowable loss. They have to manage fields to T, so they have to manage them to between 2 and 3 tons. Okay, and their other 15% have higher soil loss levels, so they would generally have an allowable level of 5. So the predicted annual soil loss for most of the fields is below 0.5 ton. So they're exceeding the state requirement for soil loss. They're allowed up to, depending on the soil, between 2 and 5 actually. But the majority of the fields are being managed way below what the state requirement is. They're far exceeding the regulations. For sure. Okay, so corn acres, as I mentioned, there's not that many, about 229 acres. To much of my surprise, the majority of them were cover cropped. Okay, there were a few fields that weren't, but those farms have agreed to cover crop this year. We'll do whatever we need to, is what they said. And they're happy to cover crop those fields. They'll work with us to do it. Reduced tillage, this actually was shocking to me. Most all the land is in reduced tillage or no till. We don't have recreational tillage occurring in these fields, which is a thing. I always tell the farmers, stop recreating with tillage and recreate on the beach. And in Lake Carmi, they're actually doing that. There's not a lot of full tillage going on, moldboard plowing, anything like that. So crop rotations, and also manure injection. And manure injection has become more popular on the corn ground there, but not on the hay ground. So before I move to the next section, as an agronomist, looking at everything that is currently being done in the watershed, there is only one additional field practice that I think would make a significant difference in the watershed. Okay? And every farmer has agreed that they would put this practice into place with the proper equipment and resources. Okay? I mentioned before the high phosphorus risk fields are hay fields. Okay? The ones that are in the watershed. Why is that? Because you apply manure on the surface of the ground and you don't put it into the soil. So it lays on the surface, being at risk of loss. Okay? Every farm has agreed that they would try to inject the manure on the hay acres if we had the right equipment. And I say that because it is a rocky place. And so equipment that is generally used for injection is used in the Lake Champlain Basin where we don't have a lot of rocks. Okay? So this is going to take some time to figure out. But everybody, there was not one person that wasn't willing to do that on the 1,200 or 1,100 acres of hay. Okay? No, it exists. Okay, so and there's a lot of acres too, so it's not just a piece of equipment. And then, they're already going above and beyond what the regulations are. It's very clear to me. This is definitely way above what they, are required to do. And
How do we help them?
we can talk about that when we're done, but it's possible to help, and I think it is 100% possible to get it done. Because when you have willing people, you got the right tools and resources, why wouldn't it happen? Okay? Yes?
I know that in the Clean Water Fund, when we first set that up, the agency had money set aside for the manure injector.
I think they've spent it all, but I'm not sure. I can't attest to that. Okay? But as an outsider looking in, as an agronomist, that, it would be good for a lot of reasons beyond the environment. But really, if we want to take all of the P indexes and put them to low, that's what you need to do. That's what we need to do.
So right now, any farmers using manure injector?
Yes, there are 2 farms. One farm that has an injector, but it's not appropriate for grass burn. Okay? There's special tools. Chris?
Before
Yeah.
we leave,
Yep.
T.
Yes.
behind,
Yeah.
Can you say something about where do those levels come from? I mean, what were they designed to do?
Yeah. Well, they definitely weren't meant to be regulatory in any way. Okay. So what T does is it's really more of a soil quality piece, to be honest, because it says that if you're above the tolerable loss, you're degrading the soil far too fast. And soil degradation obviously is linked to soil health. I don't want to say they're one and the same, but if you're not managing the fields and you're degrading the fields, okay, you obviously have poor quality soils. So, it wasn't a tool that was meant to be regulatory. It was essentially a tool to monitor and to maintain, the integrity of our soils and to keep them from degrading, okay? So, that's really was the goal of it through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the USDA NRCS program. Okay? None of these were designed to be regulatory tools, which they are now being used for. Yes. Okay.
Heather, you have a question?
Yes. Yes, sir.
From House Natural Fish and Wildlife, the indicators that you use for phosphorus in soil, I didn't see anything about glyphosate and how glyphosate interacts with available phosphorus and runoff of phosphorus. And are you using that, or are you studying
We are not using those indicators at that time. They're very much still indicators that are in development. The indicators that we're using are indicators that have been, sort of tried and true for many, many years. So those indicators are, on the forefront of research today, but there's no solid indicator to be used on farms at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of more.
Sorry, there's another questions.
Yes. Yeah, please.
I'm heartened to hear the report you're giving
Yes, sir.
about the data, but we know there's obviously been a crisis last summer, and the state's TMDLs for Carmi pegs the phosphorus at about, I wanted to say it was 81 or 85%.
So I think I'm gonna get there. Yeah. Okay, but thanks for bringing that up. So this is a point that I want to make, and this is practice implementation. So you can see the blue. This is from 2017. All right. So the blue is practices that were funded through programs. Okay. So these might have been farms that were enrolled in an NRCS EQIP program, or maybe they had access to state BMP dollars. Okay, so that's the blue bar. The most recent information, I believe, that you were given maybe by either the Vermont Agency of Agriculture or the Agency of Natural Resources. I have it right here. Maybe you remember seeing this somewhere along the line. Okay. It basically estimates phosphorus reduction currently in 2017 based on program practices. So based on farmers that were enrolled in programs. What it didn't look at was what farmers do above and beyond the programs. And I think people forget that, yes, there are farms that will enroll in programs to be able to implement practices. But there are a lot more farms and a lot more acres that are in practices paid for by the farmers. And we are not capturing those. That was very clear to me when I visited these farms. Okay? So you can see cover crop acres as a great example, what was enrolled in programs versus what the farmers actually did. Okay? So I think there was roughly 133 acres in cover crops. Remember, there's 229 of corn, okay, last year. And what was monitored through program dollars, I think, was 30 acres, okay? So 2 points. There are some taxpayer dollars that go into the water quality cleanup on agriculture, but the exponential amount of money spent by the farmers and the other practices that they're doing is not being captured. We were able to capture that, and now we're working with the Agency of Natural Resources to update this, okay? We wish we had that for today. That wasn't going to happen for various reasons, but we have the information, and we want to show what the farmers are doing, okay? So you can see again. The other piece that I think you should understand is that not every environmental conservation practice that a farm is implementing even goes into these models. I don't know if you know that. They're trying to build the model to be more robust, but it doesn't even capture manure injection at this point, which is a practice I just told you, if we're going to make any more difference on the land, this is a practice that we need to, think about how we're going to get done. But then when we do it, how are we going to show you? Because it's not something that's built into the model yet. Okay, same with reduced manure application, grass waterways. I mean, there's many practices that are being done that are, first of all, not even being, the ones that can be captured in the model are not being captured, and then there's practices that aren't even in there. Okay? But again, the point is there's more going on than you think or can even be told by your own agencies because they don't have all the information. I'm showing it to you today that there is a lot going on up there. There are practices on every acre. Many of the acres have more than one practice. Levels of phosphorus are being drawn down. So it's good work.
Is the orange graph, is that what farmers are doing?
Yes.
Pretty much on their own?
Yes, I did. I added in the program amount too. Yes. Yeah, I mean, anyway, yes. Okay. So we were talking about the TMDL a little bit. We actually didn't want to get into that too much because, of course, it's a sore spot for many of the farmers, of course, because they, there's 2001 National Land Cover Data Set. I want to thank Carolyn Alves at the Agency of Agriculture for helping us with this. And then you can see 2011 land use map, and then you can see 2017 land use map. So we are stuck in 8-year-old, you're 8 years behind, I guess, if we're still talking about what it was 8 years ago, right? It's totally different now. Okay, we have to be moving forward. I don't think we can keep saying, I know we can't keep saying that there was 85% coming from, there was in the past tense. That was 8 years ago. The landscape looks completely different now. I mean, totally different, okay? I mean, based on the numbers that Jeff and I put together, there's 50% less ag land compared to 2011. So how does that change the story? You know, I don't know. My work was to bring you this information today, but I do know the land use has changed. I do know the practices that the farmers are putting on the ground. And so to be living in the past without moving forward to capture what we're doing, I don't know if that's helpful at this point. You know, I just don't think it is. We don't have the current information. You know, we couldn't even run the model fast enough to bring you what we, show it currently is. How many years later? There's a problem with that,
If I could.
Yes, please.
A lot of the problem with phosphorus is the legacy.
Yes.
Of phosphorus, because it never leaves the water column. So land use practices may be very different today, but we are still dealing with what went on, say, over the last 50 years. And so
absolutely. Yes.
that is not wasted information.
No. I absolutely agree. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, based on your presentation, I'm just trying to elevate
Yeah.
of the historic
Please.
contribution
Absolutely.
to what's happening.
And it's not to say 10 years ago, right, that the contribution was this from this and this from that. But we're making rules today that are going to impact people and what they're doing today, not what they were doing 10 years ago. And I think that's the piece that we have to think about. You know, if we were 10 years ago, we had that many animals in the watershed, very different picture, and plus we had manure coming into the watershed, okay? So who knows what was happening? I don't know. Yes, I was on the job. Maybe I should be more responsible for knowing, but I didn't know. I do know today that the picture looks a lot different, okay? And that there is a lot being done. There's a lot of successes, and they need to be captured. I want to turn this over to the farmers to talk to you, but I wanted to end just to say a couple more things. I think the thing, and this is on a more the social capital level, right? The people level, which is very different than collecting the numbers and showing you the graphs. Okay, I was amazed that the farmers would work with us. And I became even more amazed by the fourth meeting when people started to really open up about how they were feeling. And I don't know if any of them are going to say this today. I feel like they should. But there is not a single person in the state of Vermont who should get up in the morning and be afraid to walk out the door to do their job. And I hope you agree with that, because I'm also a Vermonter, and I am so proud to say that. And I'm proud of that because I go out every day and I try to make a difference in this community that I was born and raised in, and so wasn't 7 generations of Darby before me. I consider Vermont a special place where we respect each other and we solve problems by working together, not harassing people, not bullying or intimidating people. I have a 5-year-old son. He was there the day they were telling these stories. I was ashamed to know that we let that happen, all of us. You won't maybe hear that from them today, but bullying, harassing, intimidation is not how we're going to clean up that lake. I have so much respect for all of you and what you do every day and have to put up with too. But I felt like you should know that we need to bring this up a level, and we need to move forward. We are at a different place, I am ready to do that. These farmers, even though they feel the way they do, they did not want to come today. They did not want me to give Linda their names for afraid of what would happen today in this room. And you know what they're more afraid of? What's going to happen tomorrow. And elsewhere. Okay? So these folks are very brave to come here and just actually tell you all the great things that they are doing. And I know you're here and you'll listen. And I just want to thank you for your time. And I am also very happy to share additional information with you if you need to. So I'd like to start, unless people need...
You're going to introduce you.
I am, yes. All right. What's that? You want to play with them, don't you? I want you to listen. I know. Well, now I know from now on what to do when I come into your committee.
Thanks a lot, Heather.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to start. We have every farmer, okay, from the Watershed represented here today. They all have information to share with you. One farmer was not able to attend because of a family issue, and he sent a delegate, so they'll be speaking on his behalf. So I'd like to start by introducing Karina Stanley, who's going to be our first presenter.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start by saying good morning to you and letting you know sincerely how much I appreciate that you've allowed and welcomed the Lake Carmi watershed farmers. I am an 8th generation landowner on my farm. It's never been out of the family. My husband and I raise a very small herd of beef, grass-fed Black Angus beef. We have less than 50 animals. You know, we started with 3 or 4, and somehow that grew a little bit. But we also produce syrup, so he'll be going home to do that shortly. And we're on a 300-acre farm. Only part of our farm is in the watershed. We're actually in 2 towns, 2 watersheds. I want you to think about, did you eat today? I hope you're saying yes. Even if you had a deep-fried Twinkie and a bag of Doritos this morning, you can thank a farmer, because even those items have components that are produced by farmers. We want to continue to produce food for people in the watershed. Farmers want clean water, just like all of you want. We also want healthy soil, and we'd like clean air. That's a lot to ask, but it is all a crucial part of our lives, along with the healthy food. Farmers are about closing the cycle. We want to keep those nutrients in the soil and out of the water. We want to be able to produce as much food as we can, but keeping it healthy for the land and for humans. We want to continue, as I said, to be the food producers and the land stewards that we've been for a long time. And we hope that you will allow us to do this in a peaceable way, as Heather mentioned. It is very scary to be here today. I have hidden for a long time. As a small farmer, it was easier to hide. And I'm here to say I step up to the plate to do what needs to be done. Governor Scott has talked about tourist dollars and bringing people to Vermont. We've been doing this. We've done this for generations. We have the pastoral views. When you see photographs of Lake Carmi, look at those fields. Look at those natural tree buffers that have been there for a long time. In our neighborhood, we're not right on the lake. We experience a lot of bicycle groups. We're near the Canadian border. Bicyclists come down all the time, many groups a week. They stop and they sit in the shade of our maple trees. We welcome them. My husband even a couple of years ago went out and handed popsicles out to a couple of gentlemen, and they showed up the next year to say thank you. Maybe they wanted more popsicles, but they did. They personally came the second summer to say thank you. One of our farmers here today, many years ago when he was a young boy, his family was featured in Vermont Life. and his mother and sister were featured at the Vermont State Park, dipping in the water on a hot day. There's just so many ways that we have helped paint that picture of Vermont that brings tourists here. I'm also a 30-plus year Vermont educator here in Vermont. Normally I would have been with preschool today reciting Humpty Dumpty, but thank you, you spared me 1 week.
I did.
Oh, I know, I felt right at home. I kept thinking Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. So I know that STEM is important in our schools. That's a piece we're working on. I'm doing squishy circuits tomorrow with fourth graders. Farmers have integrated STEM too. Thanks to people like Heather and Jeff, we are doing that and we are open to doing more. I hope that you will encourage me personally to stay in this state. I don't want to leave my farm. I hope that you will see my using my Vermont pension, spending it in this state as an important piece of farming. I sincerely thank you for this time.
Thanks. All right, thank you. So, Chris Wagner is our next speaker.
Well, I'm glad I get to sit down. You won't notice both legs stuck into half my pants here. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, although, you know, it's probably preferable to be back at home getting something done on the farm, but this is important, so I really appreciate that we had the chance to be here. My wife and I have a farm in the Lake Carmi watershed where until recently we milked a medium-sized herd of dairy cows. I'm originally from Minnesota, but after graduating from University of New Hampshire, chose to work as a farm manager on the farm that we currently own. With numerous streams, ditches, ponds, and wetlands on my farm, it became obvious to me right away when I started working there in 1992 that one of my top priorities would be protecting water quality. To that end, we have implemented practices and procedures on our farms, either on our own or through the generous help and advice of fellow farmers, citizen groups, and organizations whose job it is to assist in such matters as resource management and water quality. I never thought that I would be having to stand before the public and explain that we were doing this work. I just simply thought that it was important to do it. But lately it seems that we as farmers are the targets of slander, and as the Agency of Ag has said to me on more than one occasion, we need to show them what we are doing, or that we are doing something. It is not entirely clear who is meant by we and who is the them, but for right now, I will try to explain some of what has been done on our farm in the interest of water quality. So I'll just kind of go down through a list of a bunch of practices that we've done and try to explain what they've really meant. Early on, there wasn't a lot of formal things that we did, but we allowed high school students to sample for laboratory analysis several streams on our farms. This is just something I was more than happy to let somebody come on the farm and do. And by the way, that's changed now. I wouldn't just let that happen today. It's not the way people want to use the information, and then they end up getting into other situations with us. So it's unfortunate because those kinds of things really help, those collaborative efforts. And there are other various citizen groups who had a vested interest in Lake Carmi who visited the farm and would enjoy giving a tour to, which is another thing I probably wouldn't be very open to at this time, which is, again, pretty unfortunate. Since then, our projects have gotten considerably more involved, and so I'll just kind of go down through what we've done over the years. We've shifted our forage production to 100% grass-based by seeding down all the cornfields and using no-till practices to improve grass stands. We've improved ditches to reduce phosphorus transport in the waterways. We've installed a biofilter to treat surface water that passes through our feed storage area, otherwise known as a silage leachate system. We have kept a nutrient management plan on file for a couple of decades, I think, actually long before they even had the name nutrient management, probably. We have captured clean water that comes off our barn roofs to reduce surface runoff during rain events. We've adopted precision feed management to calculate nutrient mass balances on our farm, which really means we can precisely formulate the diets for our cows and we can monitor nutrient imports to the farm as well as nutrient exports from the farm. These things are available to farmers, and people don't really understand, I think, how much goes into feeding a cow and what the economic impacts are of that. We don't just willy-nilly throw out grain or fertilizer because there's no economic reason to, and we're already suffering badly enough in the economic environment we're in. We also installed a manure separator, which does just what it says. It separates a solid portion from the liquid in the manure. By doing this, we can reuse the resulting solids as bedding for our cows and compost or sell the surplus. This helps us balance the fertility requirements on our land or export as needed. We sacrifice some productive land to create buffers and fence livestock out of wet areas and streams. Along one major ditch on our farm, we planted a multitude of shrubs and trees to create wildlife habitat and maintain stream bank integrity. This did nothing to help our bottom line. But I did see some black-billed cuckoos down there, and I mention this because I know some of you are into that kind of thing, and I just wanted to say I'm with you. And I got to tell my dad, who's not a farmer, he's a biologist, that we got black-billed cuckoos on our farm. Whoopee! You need to know that this farmer is a farmer because I enjoy being out in the natural world, and taking care of the environment is part of that. So that's some of what we've done. Driving by, you might not notice that. You'll notice the large manure pit in the foreground. You'll notice where the heifers bunched on a hot summer day too close to the stream bank. You may notice the large machinery brought to us by the custom harvester. And it's not easy. Sometimes we flub up just because we're human. Sometimes the 2 inches of deluge that comes in a 1 hour period lays to waste the best plans. Sometimes, a lot of times, lousy milk prices prevent us from spending money on projects that do not return on their investment. But I'm committed to the greater good and the common goal of a healthy lake, and I know all the farmers here today feel the same. And it's pretty humbling for me to sit on this road in the middle of the generations of Vermont-born farmers and say I'm not from here. But doesn't mean I can't appreciate and love the place and try to take care of it. So I try to fall into the tradition that exists here as well.
We still like you, just saying.
Oh, thanks. For my farm specifically, there are infrastructure improvements and alternative methods of manure applications, or spreading shit, as we say, that I would like to explore. We recently sold all our cows, and we're the reason there are no more milking cows in the watershed at the present time. But we have no intention of letting our investment in land and infrastructure sit idle. It will continue to be a farm, and I think whoever chooses to operate it will need to have the right kind of things in place to protect the water, and I think they're going to have the right kind of relationship with the community to make it work. Thanks for hearing us.
Thanks, Chris. Claudette Carswell, the Rose Farm.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not a public speaker at all, so I will be reading from my paper. Please excuse me for that. As Heather said, my name is Claudette Carswell, and I am here with my sister, who gets to sit over there. But I would like to thank you for allowing us to tell you about our farm. Our grandfather bought our farm in 1939. Our father, his name was Claude, worked side by side with his father until while his two brothers went to war to fight in World War II. During his farming years, our father always welcomed the steady flow of campers from Lake Carmi State Park. He loved showing them the way a farm worked. Our father's life was always committed to the love and respect of the land and the animals, in which he taught us to do the same. The beautiful views of Lake Carmi have been part of our lives. We care and have been caring about the lake. The farmers have been portrayed as not caring, and that is far from the truth. This is the good part. Our mother, Lorette, is 90 years young.
She wanted to be here.
She did want to be here, and we said no.
Yeah.
You guys didn't. This would be too much for her. But this is difficult for her to actually hear that there's a possibility that the right to run a farm might be taken away, and that's difficult. On our farm, we've implemented practices to protect the land, which include a nutrient management plan, that was set up specifically for our farm. We no longer grow corn and have ceded all of our fields to grassland in an effort to do our part. Please hear our stories and understand we enjoy living and playing on Lake Carmi just like everyone else. In conclusion, I would like to thank you again for listening to our side of life on Lake Carmi.
Jamie St. Pierre.
I would like to start with thanking you guys for having us today. As Heather said, my name is Jamie St. Pierre, and I am a 5th generation farmer and a 7th generation Vermonter. On our farm, we have 3 generations working together in a community that is dependent on agriculture to sustain our economy. I went to college at Cornell University to pursue my dream in continuing in this industry. A key component of our studies was nutrient management. We are proud of the work we do and investments we make for sustainable agriculture and the environment. We were the 2nd dairy in the state to build a methane digester and also the 2nd large farm operation, LFO, to be permitted back in 2001. We have invested more than $4 million into our farm structure for water quality in the landscape we operate this year. Our family is also 4th generation owners of a camp on Lake Carmi. I spent my summers growing up on the lake and hope someday to have my children grow up swimming and fishing just as I did. Our family rents 100 acres of land in Lake Carmi and the Lake Carmi Watershed. We have diligently followed the recommended water quality practices, which include, and there's many other things as Chris reminded me of, which include planting cover crops, injecting and incorporating manure, and installing grass buffers. For the past several years, we have reduced our manure application rates to be much lower than the nutrient management plan recommends. This means we are not providing, as Heather explained, the nutrients our crops need in our efforts to ensure that our manure is not lost in the transport to waterways. All of our soil tests in the watershed test optimum for the phosphorus level. We take our responsibility to protect the environment seriously and are strongly committed to this community. I am 22 years old, and dairy farming has been my dream since my barns and tractors could fit in the corner of my bedroom. I personally, with the help of my family and student loans, have invested over $250,000 in my education so I can be a dairy farmer for the next 40 years. I am committed to my dream of being a dairy farmer in the great state of Vermont, and that is why I'm here today representing my family in this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Carolyn Cattell.
Good morning. Thank you for giving the farmers of Lake Carmi Watershed the opportunity to address this group. My name is Carolyn Cattell, and my husband Peter and I found our small abandoned farm 40 years ago. We worked hard to improve the land. We milked 50 cows, and we raised 3 children. We eventually bought more land and another farm, and we also built a cottage on the lake that we rent. Our animals are all gone now, but we still want to continue to grow crops to make a living. Everyone in this room is going to be affected by this bill, and we care about the lake. The small group of people that are set against the farmers just don't understand how it would be what they see now. If the farms were gone, the land would either be developed or it would grow to brush and trees. We have 104 acres of cropland in the watershed, and we rotate crops in such a way that we have less than 50 acres of corn and the rest in grassland. We haven't spread any manure in the last 2 years. And this past fall, we did a big project with the state to drain a pond in front of our house. I'm not really sure if it was all that necessary, but the state needed a project. And we finally agreed after a little while. We worked with John Roberts, who is here today. And we actually ended up with a better pond in the end, because what we had was just kind of a berm. So
last fall, we stopped
Did you? Okay, thank you. So thank you for listening to our story.
Thanks, Carolyn. Chandra Stanley.
Hello, my name is Chandra Stanley, and I'm 17 years old. My family has an 8th generation farm near Lake Carmi. My brother and I have hopes to be the 9th. My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather have all gotten some sort of college education. They all believe that you need to leave the farmland and your reputation better than what it was. My family has always been thirsty for knowledge and has not let others' opinions or uneducated assumptions get in the way of being successful. My family has taken many steps without government assistance and countless water quality preventions for decades. Our story hasn't been factually told. We continue to take proactive steps to correct the situation we didn't cause. I ask you now to please base your decision on the true and complete facts. We have heard that the elephant in the room is agriculture. Maybe instead we should focus on the fact that Franklin County farmers are leading the way in protecting our lands and waters. We ask that you make these decisions based on these important facts, decisions that I hope will positively impact every farmer in Vermont. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, Scott. Forget it. I'm not Scott.
Scott Coronen. Not a lot of Finns in the state. So my wife spoke earlier. She has she's the 8th generation on our farm. We're a grass-fed Angus operation, and one thing, important point, is we import no phosphorus at all. So the little bit of fertilizer I put on has no phosphorus in it, and the manure we spread is directly from the cattle that eat the grass from that same ground. So there's nothing new additional put on there. So she talked about a little bit about the tourism factor, and it goes deeper than that. So a lot of people you know people who have moved in from another state, or maybe you have yourself. And as you moved in here, as you were thinking about moving here, did the scenery remind you of a suburb in New Jersey? Of course not. So it's that working landscape that is the it's necessary to remain Vermont, to have that working landscape. And Governor Scott and a bunch of others here in this town are working to increase the tourism in the state. And if you damage that farming infrastructure and those farms, as Carolyn alluded to earlier, if we're not farming it, if we're not taking crops from that property, then what's going to happen next to that property? We're not independently wealthy. We can't just keep it. So we need to make sure that we maintain that landscape, and there's the solutions that can maintain that landscape and prevent any kind of pollution problems. And in this crowd, we don't yell and scream. That's not our style. But don't make any mistake. We are every bit as passionate about our land, our water, and our community as anybody. And that's emphasized with Ms. Stanley, who just barely spoke. 9th generation. We're all about saving this for the next generation every single time, and that's why we work so hard. Because a lot of these farms are integral parts of not only our business but our homes. Our homes are tied to this land, and it's not like a second home, and it's not for recreation. It's our home. We get up every morning, we look out on the same farm. So it's really important for us to maintain the integrity of that farmland. And despite the bad economical conditions, particularly for dairy farmers, a lot of them still get up, 4 o'clock or so in the morning, and they're still working, usually until dark, and quite often well after that. And we bring thousands to the local economy. Just this fall, I had a small excavator up there fixing a stone wall. There's $2,000 that I contributed, to my wife's dismay, to the local economy. but sometimes it feels like we're alone with this important work, trying to carry the whole load of preventing any kind of pollution or runoff and that kind of thing. Because picture if you're out mowing your lawn or washing your car or something like that, and you get people who constantly stop and take pictures of you, and that kind of thing while you're doing that. Well, it's hard to do a good job if that happens. But despite that, we're still working to do the right thing for the future generations, and we'll do our part. We're doing our part, and we'll continue to do our part. And the current info indicates that we are making progress, not just kicking the can down the road, as some folks might say. And we need to, give the Ag Department the funding and the freedom and respect to do their work with us, and we'll work with them along with a bunch of others, certainly. And we can make this. Carmine will gradually see the progress. It takes time. It'll take a long time for that to happen. But if we continue to work together toward solution to fix the problems, I think we'll end up with a better lake in the long term, for sure, for all the future generations, certainly. And again, thank you folks very much for this opportunity. We appreciate it.
Thank you. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure everybody has time.
I'm willing to stay here after.
Okay. All right. All right. So Dan, you're next. You want to go next, or?
Sure.
Okay. And if you have handouts, I'm happy to hand those.
Yeah.
Okay. Each one. Okay. Yep. That's a lot of handouts.
Hi, my name is Dan Larrabee, from Franklin, lifetime resident around there. I'm going to speak something a little bit different. We're also a camp owner on the lake. My kids, I think we might have bought the first one 25 years ago, probably, and we have some rentals. So we all want clean water. The thing is, it seems like it's one-sided for me, and I'm going to speak about the camps. I'm a longtime resident of Franklin, and there's other things that are contributing pollution to the lake. And the things that have changed is the camps, for number one. They have changed a lot, because 20 years ago, people used to use them a couple times during the weekends, and that was it. The uses have changed tremendous down there. And it's not just 2 or 3 people down there. And if you look on the map that tells you the soil, none of that soil is even good for septics down there. I figure around July 4th, there's probably 5,000 people around that lake. People have dishwashers, washing machines, and soil does not drain. We did replace ours. I'm not saying they're perfect. We did put leach beds in close to 15 years ago. 2 camps did have 2 pipes direct right to the lake. So I think there's other things that we need to be looking at too down there. And there was some research done here just lately. I think it goes back to the 2008-2009 record. There was 162 acres of urban land being used down there. Well, that's wrong. That's 700 acres around that lake that's being used. That changed a lot. You see on the map, and there's a new map coming out that will have that information on there. And there's not 204 camps. There's between 300 and 340 camps around that lake. I think it's one of the most congested lakes in the state of Vermont for housing or for camps. I mean, I'm not really ratting on people, but I can't stand that they're pointing the finger at the farmer, and it's not all them. They're doing a great job. I think we got to start looking somewhere else. And the other thing I'm going to bring up is, I did a little homework. You'll notice in the back of your little file that you got of the paperwork, there's fireworks. Never used to have a lot of fireworks, and I understand they're very high in phosphorus. Well, on Lake Carmi, it goes for about 2 weeks, before and after July 4th. And where do they go? Right over the water. Now, there's a couple lakes that are banning them now, if you notice in that little flyer there. So there's a lot of things that's happening to the lake. And like I believe that you were saying that things were changing or in 08 records, well, things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot down there. People camping, people stay there from 6 to 8 weeks. It's not just a weekend down, or a lot of Canadians used to own camp. They come down for the weekend or their holiday, 1 week. That's changed. That's changed. So I'm just here, I want to work with everybody too. It sounds like it's kind of like one-sided, and I don't like that. So I'd like to work with everybody. Thank you for your time.
Nancy Kane.
Hi.
That one I can pronounce.
All of it. Thank you for hearing our story. I'm Nancy Kane, an owner and manager of Kane Scenic River Farms. Kane Scenic River Farm.
Scenic River. Yeah.
Kane Scenic River Farm is a permitted LFO. It is owned and operated by myself, my husband Thomas, and my 2 children, Ashley and Aaron. We also have a methane digester, so we separate our solids. We make our own bedding. We rent 100 acres of grassland in the Lake Carmi watershed. Some of our land is rented. That is rented comes from my niece, who runs a wedding venue. Therefore, we're in really close contact with her because she has weddings there almost every weekend, and no bride manure is not spread anywhere near the fields. And it's just a beautiful view for her. They all love it. She's booked every weekend. We also own a camp on this lake for the past 42 years. And if we can, we try to get there on Sunday, and we do not rent it out. I have 9 grandchildren that I want to be able to swim, boat, fish, and generally enjoy this lake like my children did. It's a lot of memory there. We have a nutrient management plan in place for as long as we have rented this land for the past 15 years. Our soils are regularly tested, and the nutrient management plan is adjusted accordingly. We are willing to make further improvements if necessary and funds are available. One thing that we could do is inject manure on these hayfields if this could be done economically and is feasible. Thank you for your time.
Larry Jarvis is going to speak on behalf of Jim Dewing today.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Jarvis. Just to let you know, I am a farmer in the Bakersfield-Enosburg area. And sit in behalf of James and Jennifer Dewing to read a statement that they're sorry that they couldn't be here for. J&J Lakeview Farm, James and Jennifer Dewing. We are 7th generation on this 400-acre farm that borders Lake Carmi. We have over half a mile of lakeshore property with 50 camp lease lots on Lake Carmi. And I should add, we are one of the ones that have one of those leases there. So we have a huge tie to that area. We have been working for over 30 years on conservation practices to control erosion on the farm. These practices include, I have been strip cropping since 1984, which I can attest to. We've had that camp longer than that, and it's always had strip crop just before you would turn down the Lake Drive. He's always been on cutting edge, staying ahead of these systems, different cropping practices. He has system tiled drain fields, which helps dry out the land and aids the soil and rain absorption, creating less erosion and runoff. He has stone lined about 3,000 feet of stream banks that run through his farm. He built grass waterways on the recommendation of the Soil Conservation Service. He seeded down whole fields where required, 50-foot buffers where needed. All the corn land on his farm is no-tilled. All manure on the ground is injected and applied in accordance with the nutrient management plan. And all of his corn land is cover cropped. We have raised our family on this farm. We have 2 more generations growing up here on this farm. We've been trying for years not to pollute Lake Carmi. This is our home. And signed James and Jennifer Doing. And I'd just like to make one comment that got brought up a little earlier about harassing the farmers there. I have worked with Jimmy about 10 years ago. He was also a custom operator. And I was over his farm one day and just chatting on what we're going to do for the next day on some land. And a passerby stopped by, and I couldn't believe the discussion that ensued. And this has been going on for 10 years. And I don't sit in this watershed, but these people behind me, it really hits you in the heart. What has been going on, not just this last couple of years, but for 10, 15 years. And they are doing the right things. So, and I'm not in the watershed, so I really shouldn't be speaking anymore about this, but I'm standing behind Jimmy 100%. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Jim didn't say this, but he is also in our tile monitoring program. So, Roland, are you going to get up here?
Yeah, I'm going to.
I'm going to have to talk for you if you don't. Okay. Okay, Roland Rainville. Well, no, I'm afraid of him. Yeah, not you. Just kidding.
You can notice I don't have anything written down.
All right.
Because I'm not a writer. I am a farmer and proud of it. On my current farm, I started when I was 16 on the farm I was. It took me 4 years to convince my father to sell it to me. So I own that farm since I was 20 years old. I was a little ahead of my father because he only bought the neighboring farm when he was 22. So I farmed a long time. I was hoping to keep this farm into generations. I wasn't lucky enough to have a son. Got a beautiful daughter. Wouldn't trade it for 10 sons. But I was lucky enough to have a brother that had boys, and they got 3 nephews that want to farm my farm. And we're trying to figure out how we're going to farm it on this economics. I thought it was going to be an economics thing, but it's not. We're wondering if we can farm it because of the public opinion of how farmers farm their land. I've gone to a lot of meetings now that I've never gone to. I've never done this in a million years. And I guess I'd like to start with, I like thanking you for being here, but you're paid to be here. None of us farmers are paid to be here. You've got 100% of us here. And more because there's twice as many that aren't in the watershed that are here because they're so concerned about this deal. I found out that the issue of this 85% is ag. The number is not right. The state knows it's not right. I've been told it many, many times by state organizations that it's not right, but they use it. It's in the papers, it's in the news, it's everybody. So the public, you say it long enough, people believe it. And they believe it now.
It's in the paper, it's true.
Well, I read the paper because I like to read fiction every now and then. But you got to understand that people believe it after a while. And why wouldn't somebody be mad at a farmer if we are the ones polluting? I know we're not, but you can't tell them that. This is uprooted. This is a little town in Franklin. It's not even a lake, it's a pond. It was called Franklin Pond. It was never called Lake Carmi until later on. We go to the watershed meetings. I've never gone to a meeting where we need an armed guard. The state people were so scared at those meetings that they brought armed guards. That's stopped now. We've calmed down. But I've never gone to a meeting, a farmer meeting where we needed an armed guard. But these people are upset about the manure being spread around the lake. I know everybody says this is a water issue, and it should be. But I think it's more about the manure. People don't want that manure spread around their houses, around their camps, and we can prove we're not doing it. We're not putting enough on our farm anyway. I've got 1 cow for every 5 acres. The state average is 1 cow for every acre. I don't have enough manure for my farm. I started converting my farm to organic because we're thinking that might be the way we're going. I put fish oil on. People don't like driving by my farm when I put fish oil on because it smells fishy. They didn't like it when I spread the manure because it smelled like manure. I don't know what else to do. We're trying to do my farm is the best thing I've got. I love that farm. I've worked that farm, and anybody in Franklin that knows my farm, we got stone on top of stone on top of stone. And I've picked millions of them. It's not easy land to work, but it's mine. And when you look from anywhere on my farm, you can see that lake. There's a picture always in the paper every year of cows in a pond that I used to swim in with them when I was a kid. I don't have time to swim with them now. But the caption used to be, cows relaxing in a pond, cooling off on a hot summer day. Now the caption reads, cows polluting Lake Carmi. It's a whole different story now. My mother's not 90, but she's over 80. And she's so upset when she sees our farm in the paper and the caption reads, polluting Lake Carmi. Very little of my farm goes into Lake Carmi, and the stream that does go through it is all in the woods. It doesn't touch any ag land. My farm is in 3 different towns. I'm in 4 different watersheds. It's very important to me. I don't want to pollute any land, harm my land in one way. That is what grows my crops, that feed my cows, that makes my living. I was offered many, many times to sell land for houses. I could be a multimillionaire. I don't want to be. I want to be a farmer. There's been over 30 houses within a mile of my farm since we started. And if I get emotional, it's the medication I'm on.
That's what your problem is?
Okay. So over 30 houses built within a mile of my farm since I've started. Not one on my farm, because I haven't sold any land yet. We had over 50 farms in the town of Franklin when I started. There's less than 10 left. There's no more on my road. My road, I'm the only farm on the road. So when something happens, it's my fault because I'm the farmer on the road.
Last name, stain.
Going to be. My father died in the middle of a field when we were farming. And that's the way I want to die. But I want to keep this farm going for the kids. Most people don't want to hear the truth. The truth isn't about the farmers. It's about Mother Nature. That lake does what it does. Phosphorus comes from all areas, from the bogs. We can't even get the state to agree where Franklin Watershed is. The bogs create, the forests we create. Well, it comes from everywhere. It's been there forever. Last fall we had warmer weather than we've ever had. That lake is only 19 to 20 feet deep on the average. It's a warm lake. It's going to, there's where your phosphorus comes from. I mean, your algae blooms and all that. It's a warm lake. It's going to do that. It's in there. My pond with the kelp in it didn't have any algae blooms in it, but that lake did. It's not anybody's fault. It's Mother Nature. You want to blame somebody. You can't. It's nobody to blame. Now, the state always, or not, I shouldn't say the state, people want to blame somebody. So then they can control them. So they can mandate stuff. There's nobody to blame here. It's just the way it is. Not saying that we can't do anything better. We can all do better things. But we got to work together. We can't just blame somebody and throw us under the bus. You know, we asked the state for help, and all I hear is, well, we're working behind the scenes. We're on the front lines. We've got some people that are seriously mad at us in the town. And it's not our fault. We proved it. Heather and Jeff, within 3 weeks, got all the information and more information than I've gave to state people in 40 years. We report every year on our crops and stuff. The state people have them. I don't know. I don't understand why the information isn't correct anymore. So I babbled long enough. I'm leaving.
We have one more person. Okay, we have one more farm in the watershed. Dina Benjamin. She'll wrap up the farmer testimony, and hopefully you can hang on for a few more minutes. All right. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'm still nervous. I thought me being last would not make me nervous. So thank you for giving the farmers of the Lake Carmi watershed the opportunity to address this group. My name is Dina Benjamin. I would like to take a few minutes to tell you about our farm. We have 2 goats, 450 milkers, 410 heifers and young stock, and 5 nearly grown children. Most days the animals give us the least trouble. We are proud to stand with our neighbors today. We are proud to be Vermont dairy farmers, even though the state of the industry is not in any way profitable, and we have been unfairly villainized in our own communities. Before I tell you how we've strived to be good stewards of the land, I think you should know what it was like for us to farm in the Lake Carmi watershed this last year. It was just short of terrible. We were bombarded with accusations and hate, and bullied, slandered in social media. Out-of-date graphs from 2014 using reports from 2009 depicted farmers being 85% responsible for the condition of the lake. Media, along with specialty groups and the anti-dairy activists, jumped all over that. We were determined to keep our head high and not be confrontational. We were in compliance in all our practices and knew no matter what we said, it would fall on deaf ears because the emotion was so high. A white van was a frequent sighting, taking pictures, driving slowly by, and one time seen in our yard at our manure pit, assumably taking pictures. My cat feeder would call me saying, "That van is here again," completely unnerved and scared as she was alone. A picture of our cows circulated social media. Very healthy and happy cows, with a pile of feed in front of them, seemingly smiled back at the camera. They were the poster children for the tragedy and inhumane containment of conventional farming. And what bothered me most was someone came on my private property, came into my barn, and approached my animals with malice in mind. During this time, untruths and propaganda flooded our newspapers, news channels, and flyers. The message on signs held at the lake access demanded everyone to take action and get rid of dairy farming. Attacks on dairy itself commenced. They were tenacious, focused, and driven to point the finger of blame to agriculture alone. While this was happening and the voices against us were loud and constant, we remained respectful, quiet, and stayed diligent to our work, waiting for the cavalry, so to speak. No cavalry came. That is the realization that brought me here today. There is no cavalry. If we want to defend ourselves, we obviously need to do it ourselves. Everyone today stopped their work and traveled 1.5 hours away to try to give you a visual of who the farmers of the Lake Carmi watershed are and try to explain to you that we are not the problem. We are playing by all the rules. We are not faceless. We have families and farms that depend on our land, and we take our responsibility seriously. If this bill gets passed and a stop is put to ag practices, including manure spreading, you will devastate our farm. That land base is needed and critical for our cropping. We don't have any other options. While they were walking through my property uninvited, they failed to take a picture of our manure injectors, bought specifically with water quality in mind. They also forgot to take a picture of our anaerobic digester, which cleans up our air and produces a much greener carbon footprint. I also didn't see them when we planted 3,000 cedar and silver maple trees along 12 acres of the Pike River, or when we voluntarily enlisted in the CREP program and took our animals out of the waterways years ago. No pictures of the 320 acres cover cropped, and no recognition of conservation awards and letters of appreciation from our watershed. Farmers are not the problem. We are part of the solution. Standing before you today are proactive and engaged farms heading in the right direction. The required ag practices are in effect, and we're complying. The lake did not get this way overnight, nor will it get fixed overnight. I urge you to look at the current data, to look at what our farms are doing, and to look at the bigger picture. Awareness and working together is what will make the difference. And thank you for your time and being heard.
So again, that was every farm from the watershed speaking to you today, and the information that we've collected. We really appreciate your time. Folks are here. There's other farmers here too. Happy to talk with you and chat with you. And I just want to thank you one last time for listening. Appreciate it.
Certainly, we should be thanking you, Heather,